Happy St. Patrick's Day and welcome to Quorum. I'm Ron Brown. Tonight we're recapping a busy day of developments on the state budget front. The state's Revenue Estimating Group reported its latest findings to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee this morning. This fresh report says that Mississippi's revenue picture is even worse than forecast in previous months. Some members of the committee questioned the reliability of the estimates, though. A few worry that those final totals could be worse even yet. Meantime, Governor Haley Barbour announced his fifth round of cuts to the 2010 state budget. More on that in just a moment. First, there has been a fair bit of green on display this morning as lawmakers marked the holiday, but it is the lack of green in state coffers that has them concerned. No luck of the Irish here as state economist Phil Pepper presented the findings of the five-member Revenue Estimating Group. Their job is to give lawmakers and the governor their most reasonable estimate on how much revenue the state will take in for the remainder of 2010 and 2011. And after 18 straight months of lower than expected revenues, that estimate is lower than ever. When the legislature wrapped up its 2010 budget last year, the group estimated that Mississippi would receive almost $4.9 billion in revenue for the general fund. In November, lower collections in taxes, fees, and other income pushed that estimate down dramatically. Now, in its latest report, the Revenue Estimating Group says the state will have less than $4.5 billion by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th, and that is $466 million less than anticipated during last year's legislative session. The state economist says the worst part of the nation's recession is behind us, but he says the recovery appears too slow to give budget writers or agency heads much relief.
Even though we think the economy is picking up gradually, we have to recognize that we've been behind 8 months here and that the revenues are not tracking the economy. Part of what's going on is that we're seeing loans go down in Mississippi or no increase in the loans going out. We see deposits going up. Consumers have real concerns, and so they're not spending the money. Now, to complicate this, we collect more money in the second half of the year than we do the first half of the year because of income tax and sales tax doubling up in June. If you look through March, the middle of March, our collections are above March of last year by 15%. But the last 4 months we've got extended, which was down substantially. So we may be seeing some turnaround right now, but we felt like that we couldn't rely on that. We were close enough towards the end of the year with only 4 months left that we had to take the existing collections into account more than we had in our, and those were down substantially.
Well, the group also revised its 2011 revenue forecasts. When they reported in November, they projected almost $4.6 billion in revenue. Today, they lowered that figure by $112 million. When lawmakers add money from state special funds and federal sources, they'll have roughly $5.5 billion to work with. Yes, that is a lot of money, but given the state's widespread obligations to education, Medicaid, public safety, and other priorities for nearly 3 million Mississippians, it doesn't seem nearly enough. Just a few hours after that report to lawmakers, the governor had his own announcement. He is ordering another $40.6 million to be cut from state agency and program budgets. That brings the total reduction in the fiscal 2010 budget to $499 million. Here's an excerpt from the governor's announcement.
With this, we hopefully are making the last cuts of the year. The only way I would make further cuts will be if revenue actually goes below the $499 shortfall before the end of the year. We only have 3 months left for departments and agencies to achieve savings. So I have tried to stay ahead of this all year, but as you can see, the revenue shortfall has gotten worse and worse. This brings us to fiscal year 11. And I will say very directly what I implied at the committee meeting. It is clear to me that the revenue estimate for 2011 is too high. Revenue in 2009 fell 4.2% below 2008. Revenue this year is now estimated to fall 6.3% below 2009. And while I believe the shortfall will not be as bad next year, I am very skeptical that we'll go from a 6.3% shortfall into positive ground in 1 year.
Tonight on Quorum, we are joined by two of the legislature's top budget negotiators. Representative Cecil Brown is a Democrat from Jackson. He's a member of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, and he chairs the House Education Committee. Also with us is Senator Terry Burton. The Republican from Newton is also on the Joint Budget Committee, and like Cecil Brown, he was present at today's presentation. We welcome both of you to the Quorum tonight. And we also welcome you to the conversation. Dial our toll-free number. That's 1-877-405-5247. We want your questions for our guests. That's 1-877-405-5247. We are also taking questions by email tonight. That address, quorum@mpbonline.org. And of course, you can join the discussion at twitter.com/mpbonline. Cecil Brown, let me ask the first question of you. The Senate Appropriations Chairman, Alan Nunnally, today failed to convince the full committee that the revenue estimation of $4.45 billion for 2011 should be even more conservative, and he certainly didn't convince you. Why not?
Well, he didn't convince me because we have a 5-person revenue estimating committee made up of professionals who meet throughout the year. They try to come to a consensus, and in fact do come to a consensus. They're led by the state economist who is getting his information from a national econometric model, and they reached a consensus estimate on what they believe the revenue estimate would be. The revenue would be for next year. They were asked if it was conservative. They said yes. Each one of those persons was polled, and they all said they agreed with it. And Senator Nunnally didn't have really a convincing basis for making any change. He just had sort of this gut level belief that it was going to be lower than what the revenue estimate committee had projected, so we went with the committee.
But they've been wrong 18 straight months. I mean, there is some kind of logic to that if they've been wrong 18 straight months.
They're always wrong. It's an estimate, and the history has shown some years are high, some years are low. If you go back over a 20-25 year period of time, they're virtually at zero. Some years a little high, some years a little low. They've been low. They've been high the last couple of years. Before that, they were low. So it's, they're doing the best job they can do, and I just didn't believe that Senator Nunnally had any real basis for it other than just sort of his intuition that it was a little bit high.
Okay. And Terry Burton, what about you? Do you think that like the governor, that the estimation is too optimistic?
I think personally that the estimation is optimistic. We have, and let me say this, the Revenue Estimating Committee is made up of people who are very good at what they do. Over the last several years, they've been wrong on the high side more than they've been wrong on the low side. But it is a moving target, and it's something we have to guess 18 months out to determine what money is going to be available. So they do a great job with the information that's given to them. Representative Brown has actually served on that committee in the past in another capacity with another administration. So I'm not complaining about the committee or the work that they do. What I'm doing is saying, as a member of the legislature, as a member of the Budget Committee, as a member of the Appropriations Committee responsible for a couple of big budgets, Medicaid and public health, I think that it's better to err on the side of caution than it is to be optimistic, given the fact that we've only had 15 days of upswing after 18 months of downturn. And I think that we have not had an opportunity to see if we have a trend set that we're going to see a slow increase. I think that we are better off by going in with a low number rather than going in with a high number and then having the governor cut budgets. And yes, he agrees, and sometimes he agrees with the numbers that we do, and then he has to come back and make budget cuts. But basically, that's a function of the legislature to draft these budgets and put them on his desk. And so I would rather err on the side of caution. If we come in a little low, the worst thing that can happen is we have a cash balance at the end of the fiscal year. And I think that would be the wise thing to do, knowing the situation we're in. We're in a very volatile national economy. We are at high unemployment rates in Mississippi. Banking regulations have tightened down. Money's not flowing as freely as it was. We've got people out of work. We've got jobs that are not filled and not being filled. We've got a major problem, and I just think behooves us to err on the side of caution rather than to be optimistic.
I think we recognize that the Revenue Estimation Committee has a very tough job, and as you said, it's a moving target, and it is guesswork just by its very nature. But do you think that the process needs to be refined a little bit? Is there any way to fix the process to where they can get a little closer?
I don't think there's a better process in any of the 50 states in the District of Columbia or the federal government than we have right here in Mississippi. We have good people with knowledge. They look at all of the national indicators, they look at the local indicators and the state indicators. They do a good job. With the volatile economy that we have in this country, nobody could get it any better than these guys do. So no, I don't think that there's a better system out there anywhere.
Cecil Brown used to be on that committee?
I was, and I was head of the Department of Finance and Administration. I served on that committee for 3 years, and I can tell you that it would be hard for the three of us to reach a consensus on anything. Consensus means we all agree, not that we vote. They reach a consensus. They've got one elected official, and they've got other appointed officials on there. They work very hard to come up with a reasonable estimate of what they believe the revenue is going to be for the succeeding year. And again, they were asked today, do you think this is a conservative estimate? And they all said yes. So Senator Burton could be right, and I could be wrong, or I could be right and he could be wrong. It is, as he said, we're talking about a revenue estimate for a year that won't begin until July 1st and won't finish until June 30th of 2011. So we're a long way out from knowing exactly what the numbers are going to be.
Well, Representative Steve Holland suggested that the revenue group should be a more transparent process. Do you think that it should be more transparent, open to the public?
No, I don't think so. I've sat in those meetings. In the first place, it's not an official committee that is established by law, so it's not subject to the open meetings laws. And there's a lot of dialogue that goes on, and there's a lot of freedom to speak and debate with each other that I think would be somewhat stilted if, in fact, you had the media there. I'm an open government kind of person, but I think in that particular situation, that where there is debate, that you could have somebody, the media pick up one side. We try to keep the politics out of that, I guess is the best way to put it. And my experience has been there's virtually no politics in that debate, and I don't think there should be.
What about you? More transparency?
I totally agree with Representative Brown. If you were to open it up to the media, you also open it up to the lobbyists and political parties and all those things that might get involved in this thing. And he is exactly right. Politics is left at the front door. There's no politics involved in this process. And to open it up would mean that you would at least possibly come in contact with some of that political poison and skew some of the recommendations that we have to deal with as a member of the legislature and the budget committee in making these recommendations to the full legislature.
Okay, Senator Burton, Dr. Pepper today said that he thought that the recession was over, or at least the worst of it. Do you agree with that?
He's the expert and I'm not,
so
but I'm going to say this. I still think that it pays to be cautious at this point and not depend on 15 days of good revenue, particularly given the fact that February was a short month, and some of those collections that came in March probably would have come in the previous month had it not been February. So I think that we need to be very careful about being optimistic. By the same token, I don't want to scare the people of Mississippi. There's good reason to do business. There's good reason to keep money in the economy. There's good reason to go out there and spend where you can without overspending. We need you to do that, but by the same token, I don't know that I can personally say the recession is over, but he's the expert. I'll defer to him. I know this, it's still tough out there for a lot of families in this country and in this state. Okay,
Representative Brown, what did you think when you heard Dr. Pepper saying that?
Well, virtually all economists, I'm in the investment management business. That's what I do for a living, is follow these kinds of things. And virtually all the economists in the country say the recession is over. But if you've lost your job, it's not over. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of folks out there that have lost their jobs, that don't have an income, that don't have health insurance, and have problems yet. Most people now say the recession, which means a negative growth for 2 quarters and the GDP, is over, but that doesn't mean we're going to have a fast recovery. And I think that's what Senator Burton's talking about, is we shouldn't be so optimistic to believe we're going to have an economy that goes straight up. That's nobody that I know of not nobody, most people don't believe that's going to happen. It's going to be a slow growth economy. What that means to Mississippi in terms of tax collections, which is what we're translating that into, nobody quite knows, but I'm willing to rely on the experts today.
Well, we've got some bad numbers on housing starts. We've got bad numbers on foreclosures, all kinds of things that are still going on out there in the negative. But we have seen some signs that this thing might be about to turn around. But it's going to be a slow incline, not a quick
So better
incline.
is still bad is what we're
Yes,
saying here.
exactly.
Okay, we have a phone call for our panel tonight, and this first call is Ed from Loosedale. What's your question for the panel, Ed?
Yes, sir. I'm a property owner, and I happen to be a realtor in this market where we had 24 straight months of declining prices in existing home sales. I know this year I've lived in two counties, Forest and George County, and the reappraisal property tax has went up on both on everything I own from 20 to 40%. And in the time of demand, the doctor just stated that, we had declining home prices and a recession, and I just don't see it equitable and putting this burden on the property owners at a time, when we cannot afford that.
Okay.
I'll listen to your response.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. Do you want to respond to Ed from Loosedale?
Well, actually, I'm a little bit mystified by that myself. My appraisal went up, and I know the market value of my house didn't go up, it went down. And we have that across the state of Mississippi. Obviously, that's a county issue in terms of the appraisals, but that doesn't make it any easy for people. People are hurting out there. Their property taxes are going up, and it is a little bit mystifying as to exactly why that's happening. And I don't know what to tell you other than go down. You have a period. We have a problem with our property tax laws with regard to the way that notification is given of the reappraisal and the period of time within which people have to go in and protest the reappraisal of their property. And we've looked at that, and I've introduced legislation to try to change that, but I think people need more ability to have some relief from these reappraisals that are, frankly, in my opinion, probably wrong in many instances.
No, I totally agree. There ought to be some easy way for you to appeal the decision that you've been handed, and that hasn't happened as of yet. As Representative Brown said, we've seen legislation but failed to get it through the process and get it on the governor's desk. That needs to happen. One of the first things that I said when this session started was that we need to be very careful as we make our deliberations not to force counties and cities to raise taxes as a result of anything we do or don't do. And so this year I'm being very cognizant of that. So if property taxes go up 20, 30, 40%, we've got a real problem out there, and we're going to try to do what we can to ease that pain for you.
Okay, and a reminder that our toll-free number, 1-877-405-5247. We're also taking questions by email tonight, quorum@mpbonline.org, and on Twitter, it is twitter.com/mpbonline. Thanks for your call, Ed. The lower revenue estimation led to an immediate announcement of more budget cuts today. It came within hours. A fifth round and another $41 million for this fiscal year. I guess, Representative Brown, what lesson could we or should we have learned to do better in the future, or can we really do that?
I'm not sure about a lesson. I think the adjustment was appropriate. And I hate to say that because it's going to hurt education, which is really, I think Terry and I both share a passion for education. I hate to say that, but I do think it was appropriate. I'm concerned about the direction that we're headed, very optimistic that things will turn around. But the governor's mandated by a law that was passed by the legislature to make budget cuts when revenues don't come in as anticipated, and that's what he did today. That's what he has consistently done. I don't like the outcome, but I don't suspect he likes it either. So I think it's exactly what he had to do. I wish things would hurry up and turn around. I think they will turn around, but I think we're just going to have to live with it and get through it until they do.
Okay, Senator Burton.
It can't be easy for any chief executive officer of any corporation anywhere in America to cut budgets 5 times in 1 year. And that's what this chief executive officer of this corporation known as the state of Mississippi has had to do. I feel for him. I know that in his heart he wishes he didn't have to do that, but that's where we are. That's where that's the money has come in at the level it has. We can't go down to the basement and print any more money. He's done what he's had to do and mandated to do by law and under the Constitution. And so I feel for what he's had to do, and I feel for the state agencies out there who are going to suffer additionally as a result. But that's where we are, and that's what I say. We're in a very, very different situation than we've been in at least the last 70, 75 years in Mississippi, maybe longer. And just bear with us. We're really, honestly, trying to do the very best we can to make this thing, to weather this thing and make it turn around as quickly as we can.
Let me add to that real
Go right
quickly
ahead.
if I can. The governor has the ability to transfer up to $50 million from rainy day fund to offset budget shortfalls on his own authority. And there are a lot of people out there, particularly my friends, who would like for him to go ahead and do that. The problem I have with that is he got to the end of the year last year and we were $20 million short. And I would like for him to minimize the amount of cuts, but I would be very concerned about getting down to the month of June and finding out that he had already used all his $50 million authority and had not made the necessary cuts, and we didn't have anywhere else to go. So at this point in time, I think I agree with him that, you know, he did what he had to do. It wasn't a pleasant thing to do. It's very uncomfortable and going to be very, very tough on a lot of state employees, a lot of teachers and others. But I'm not sure we had anything else to do right now.
Okay.
As he said in his remarks today, he hopes this is the last cut of the year, but we don't know.
Okay. Well, Representative Brown, the governor made a jab today at the legislature for exempting themselves from any further budget cuts. So I guess the question is, are you lawmakers in a better position to weather more cuts to staffing and other legislative resources?
Well, the governor takes every opportunity he can to jab at the legislature, and we do likewise. So I jab at him all the time, and he jabs at us all the time. We are, and it depends on whether you're in the House or the Senate. It depends on how many special sessions we have. It depends on a lot of things. You know, there was a bill in the Senate that would have cut legislative pay, I think by 10%. It came over to the House. It was amended in one of the House committees that I serve on to say that we would cut our pay 10% or whatever the number was if all the other elected officials would cut their pay 10%, and went to another committee and got killed. I think the total savings from that would have been $170,000 or something. One major thing. It was more of a nod to what's going on. I don't have a problem with cutting our pay. Some of our members do. The legislature is not. We're not profligate in our spending, I'll tell you. We have a pretty slim budget, particularly in the House, and I think the Senate is very cognizant of that. It's something we debate all the time between the two of us. Not many people know, but we spend as much time on arguing about our own budgets between the two of us as we do a lot of the other budgets. And so I think we're pretty frugal in what we do.
Okay, what about you, Senator Burton?
On the Senate side, we began last year when the governor started making cuts to state agencies. The Senate Rules Committee went in and started making some cuts in the Senate budget and to coincide with what was going on with other state agencies. I'm assuming that will be the case with this latest round of cuts. We'll take another cut. We've actually reduced some salaries. We've not filled some positions. We've cut out all out-of-state travel. We have, and we did pass the bill that would cut the legislative pay by 10% for next year. And it's like Representative Brown said, it's not a lot of money, but it does show the people of Mississippi and the state agencies and state employees out there that we're willing to take our pain along with yours. Even though our pay might be less, it's still 10%.
Was the governor being a little unfair then in his remarks?
The governor has the opportunity. He has the bully pulpit, and he's able to say what he wants to about the legislature. And sometimes those of us who support the governor the majority of the time wish he would say either the House or the Senate, not say the legislature, but that's okay.
Let me say this about the budget situation. Both the House and Senate, we have, in the initial proposal on legislative budget, we made substantial cuts for 2011. In fact, our staff has told us if we in fact adopt the budget proposal that both the House and Senate made, we will have significant layoffs in personnel in the House and Senate, beyond the point of being reasonable. We've got to do something to restore some of those cuts because we just can't function. And maybe some people would like us not to function, but we've got people that, we got our legal staff and we got others, and we're going to have to do something about that. But we propose substantial cuts to both the House and the Senate for next year.
Okay, well, Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant chaired today's meeting of the Joint Budget Committee. He spoke to reporters afterward about the uncertainty in the revenue report. Here it is.
What that results in is uncertainty for people who are trying to put budgets out there. in state government, in school districts, IHL community colleges, and it also puts us in a situation of the governor having to make these horrendous cuts to balance this budget. So what we're trying to do in the Senate is to say we've either got to reinstate the 2% rule, and that's about $90 million that we need to set aside, and that was put in there for just these type of situations, or we need to lower this amount by another $90 million.
Well, Mr. Bryant mentioned that 2% rule, as so did Governor Barbour today. He promised to veto any 2011 budget that does not leave at least 2% of projected revenues unspent. Senator Burton, can you explain that for us, what the 2% or the 98% rule is?
Well, basically it says that the legislature shall appropriate only 98% of the projected revenue for the next fiscal year. And we have, in the past, with tough budget times that we've had to get around that rule with legislation that would allow us to get around that rule so that we could appropriate the entire amount of money that we've had at our disposal according to the revenue estimates. What's happened is, even at 100%, we've been coming up too high, and the governor's been required to make cuts. And I think the lieutenant governor and the chairman of appropriations on the Senate side was basically saying, okay, this hasn't worked. Let's just go ahead and bite the bullet and do 98%, set aside 2%, and not spend to that, and spend 98% of what the appropriate 98% of what the Revenue Estimating Committee has come up with and what we've adopted, so that if there are cuts, they won't be quite so deep. And if there aren't cuts, the worst thing that can happen is you have a cash balance at the end of the fiscal year. So, you know, part of that goes into the rainy day fund, part of it rolls over into the next fiscal year. So I think it's good, conservative, prudent operation of state government and a way to put the budget together with less pain next year, regardless of what amount of money comes in.
And you say the legislature has been getting around this rule for several years.
How
long has that been going on?
I'm not sure, Representative Brown, 4 or 5 years. We've had budgets so tight that we've had to not get around it illegally. What we've done is we've passed a law that says we will not enforce the 98% rule this year. We've done that for the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, and Cecil Brown, is the governor right to say that saving 2% of the budget, or is he right to save 2% of the budget during such lean times?
No, absolutely not. Let me just, I'm pretty upset about that, to be honest with you. This was we were blindsided by this morning. When the governor put out his budget proposal back in November, he used 100% of the revenue. He ignored the 2%, 98% rule. Joint Legislative Budget Committee met. Lieutenant Governor chaired the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. Senator Nunley was on the committee, and both of them voted to ignore the 2% or 98% rule in October or November or December when we made our final adjustment. The first time we heard about that was this morning. And the truth of the matter is neither the Senate budget recommendation nor the House budget recommendation is balanced at this point because we cut $100 million out of the budget this morning, out of revenue. And now the chairman of the Appropriations Committee on the Senate, Lieutenant Governor, and the governor are saying, well, we're going to cut another $90 million, but they don't tell us where they're going to take the $90 million from. You know, the $90 million, 63% of the budget comes from education. 50-some-odd% of that comes from public K through 12. Community colleges and IHL add another 10% or so to it, 12%, whatever the number is. And so what they're talking about doing is cutting another $60 million or so out of education. But they didn't say that. They said, we want to be conservative. Well, you're not being conservative when you're laying off teachers, and you're laying off college professors, and you're raising tuition. Northwest Community College just announced that they're going to raise their tuition by 11% next year. If they cut another $60 million, that's another 5 or 6% in tuition increase. It just can't go on like this. Now, I'm in favor of the 98% rule. In good times, we've got to do that. We need to set money aside in the rainy day fund. But what the governor's suggesting today and what the lieutenant governor just suggested is, if in fact the revenue estimate's correct, we're going to put money in a savings account in the year in which we're laying off teachers and laying off college professors and cutting state employees. That just does not make any sense to me. And I'm absolutely, profoundly opposed to that.
Senator Burton?
Well, I think over the last several years, we have all, the governor, the legislature, Senate and House, and the leaders in both of those bodies have agreed that we really and truly didn't have any choice other than to deal with the 98% rule and go ahead and appropriate 100% of projected revenue. What I think is the attempt here is to say, okay, that's fine, we've done that, we know that we're in a tough situation, let's avoid the cuts to the point we can by having this money available and not appropriating all 98%, all 100% of the available revenue. I think at some point we have to do that. I think at some point we have to realize it's a tough time. And in good times, 63% of the budget goes to education. In bad times, 63% of the budget goes to education. And you're dealing with a number that's available to you to work with. And we've got to get back on track, get back to the point where we have some funds available at the end of the fiscal year and have a beginning cash balance other than cutting budgets to the point where we start at zero every year. We're just way past that right now, and I think this is the time to do that.
Well, I can understand the governor's argument and might even agree with him in part on not dipping into the rainy day fund and making it last over 3 or 4 years. I understand that. But in one of the worst economies in U.S. history, at a period of time where we got the worst, absolutely worst tax collection record in the history of the state of Mississippi, to talk about putting money into a savings account at the same time we're cutting public education, IHL, community colleges, Department of Mental Health, Department of Health, and other vital public services, to me, is absolutely irresponsible. We don't need to be sticking money into a savings account and laying off employees in the worst period. They're going to, look, these state employees, these teachers, these others are not just losing their jobs, they're losing their health insurance, they're impacting their communities in a negative way. I mean, this is just not something that I can believe he's even talking about doing.
Okay. You are watching Quorum on MPB television and mpbonline.org. We also want to thank our listeners on MPB Think Radio. We hope you're going to call in with your questions. The toll-free phone number is 1-877-405-5247, and you can also email us at quorum@mpbonline.org or follow us on Twitter. After all that we're talking about, do you think that the governor's change on the 98% rule or the 2% rule this late in the game might be a game changer? Caught you by surprise. Do you expect it to see a special session to deal with the 2011 budget now?
I hope not. We don't need a special session. We need to get this resolved. And I can tell you the House is not going to back up on this. I've talked to the Speaker today. I've talked to the Chairman of the Appropriations, and we're not going to go along with that. So, you know, if it's a special session, if we're here till June, we'll be here till June. We're not going to do that. You know. It's not going to happen.
Do you expect that we're going to see a special session? Whether you want one or not is
I truly believe that the legislature will reach agreement on a budget within the 90-day period that we set up to do, or at least before June, like we had to do last year. We were here literally at the 11th hour, and I hope that isn't the case this year. And I think that we will agree to disagree and move forward, and get this budget done. The process is not pretty, and we all have our ideas of what we think, and we have our beliefs and we have our philosophies that we must, in good conscience, share. But we also realize that this is a business of compromise, and we will compromise on the issues without compromising on principles on both sides. We've done it for years, working with Representative Brown and the leadership in the House. We've done that for many years under several administrations, and I have never seen the system fail to work. It's going to work. I just hope that we can get it to work without any special session. I would hope that wouldn't be the case on the budget issue. I do think we have the Employment Security Commission issue we've got to deal with, but we could do that in a special session within the session if we could do something over the next couple of weeks and get that out of the way. But I think that reasonable minds and reasonable thoughts will come forward, and we will put this budget together, as ugly as it's going to be, and move forward. We know it's not going to be pretty.
And we will get into the unemployment issue in just a moment, but first we want to go to our phones, where Michael from Jackson has a question for our panel. Go right ahead, Michael.
Hi, I was watching the governor talking earlier today, and he mentioned something about state agencies being taken over the State Personnel Board. I wasn't really sure what he said, but if that is so, what does that mean for state employees?
Okay, Terry Burton.
Well, the proposal has been that several of the agencies, most of the agencies, be taken out from under the purview of the Personnel Board for a period of 1 year, so that adjustments could be made by agency directors and agency heads without the Personnel Board regulations and guidelines being in the way. That's been the proposal. It has failed to pass through the entire legislative body for the last couple of years, 3 or 4 years, in fact. In the past, that's worked in several instances. It worked with the Department of Transportation several years ago. It worked with the Department of Corrections several years ago. It worked with one of the other agencies, the Department of Agriculture, when Commissioner Spell came in. And so there is precedent that this can work, and that changes and revisions and moves can be made to make operation more efficient and not have any problems occur to the taxpayers and the service receivers out there as a result. That has been the case. It's worked, and that's been the proposal. It hasn't gotten through the process. It has passed the Senate several times and has failed to pass over in the House.
Okay. Representative Brown, what would it mean for state employees?
We are opposed on the House side to wholesale removal from the purview of the State Personnel Board. I think the good example of what can happen that was very positive was when Dr. Spell took over the Department of Agriculture. I was actually involved in that reorganization, and he did a terrific job. And the problem that generally, the State Personnel Board rules are put in place to try to prevent politics from getting involved in every hiring decision that's made in state government. You don't want a fruit basket turnover every time you have a change in administration, whether it's a Democratic administration, Republican administration. You don't want state employees who are valuable people who have been trained and doing a good job to be kicked out to be replaced by someone who's a political appointee. That's one of the reasons that you have the State Personnel Board system in place. So the House in general is not in favor, not that Governor Barbour would be guilty of that, we just in generally favor the Personnel Board protection, just like civil service protection. However, there are instances where I think it probably works well, and I don't think we would be opposed to considering specific instances where somebody could make the case, but we're generally opposed to just wholesale removal from being. In fact, we voted for the corrections under Governor Barbour to allow that to happen, so it's not unprecedented with the House either.
Okay, we have a call now from Raymond, and this is Robert on the line. What's your question for the panel, Robert?
I have a question about the internet tax on internet purchases in Mississippi. And Sid Salter has put out some numbers, and I talked to him recently, and I think he's a very reliable journalist, and he said this would bring in approximately $200 million a year to Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have a system that's punitive to businesses that come in and establish a retail outlet in Mississippi, because if they do so, they're then required to collect taxes on the internet sale. So we're discouraging businesses coming into Mississippi because we penalize them in that respect, and for coming in and establishing a business and hiring local employees and paying real estate taxes. What needs to be done to change that?
Okay, Senator Terry Burton, you want to take a stab?
And Representative Brown, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think technically any person who makes a sale to a Mississippian is supposed to collect the tax and send it to the tax commission, regardless of where that sale is made, whether it be internet, catalog, or whatever. However, if they don't have a domicile here in Mississippi, if they're not domiciled here, then the tax commission has no way to collect it. It's an honor system kind of thing. I agree. I totally agree that your local retail outlets suffer greatly as a result, because internet shopping is so easy now, it's so secure now, and so forth, and a lot of people are doing it, and those taxes aren't being collected and sent to the state tax commission. We need changes at the federal level. I don't know that that will occur. We can pass a bill here in Mississippi that would require businesses to do the right thing, but being able to enforce that and make sure that those businesses who aren't domiciled in Mississippi are doing the right thing is going to be very, very difficult. If we, in a perfect world, yes, it would generate a lot of money, and I think it would be a much more fair playing field for the local businesses in competing with these internet providers and internet shopping outlets, if they had the same rules that the local retail outlets do. And right now they don't. There's a 7% discount no matter how you figure it every time you buy something on the internet, and you don't pay sales tax.
I agree with Senator Burton. I think there's some sort of interstate compact that some states have entered into. We're going to have to give it a hard look. I mean, the internet sale business is growing every day, and tremendous business is being lost for local people, and it's hurting the state, and it's hurting local merchants. So I think it's something we've got to look at. And I'm not on Ways and Means. I haven't been involved in it. I don't think Senator Burton has. but I think the legislature's going to have to take a hard look at it.
All right, we have an education question from Rodney, who is in Booneville. Rodney, what's your question?
Yes, I appreciate you taking my question.
Sure.
Can we afford to cut the funding for education because of academic accountability and career tech accountability and the articulation agreements between the community colleges and high schools? This, I believe, is the answer to our workforce development. What kind of funding are you putting in for workforce development training for those students in career tech?
Okay. Well, thank you, Rodney. That's you got the question out there.
Rodney, we're not
Brown.
putting enough in. To be honest with you, we've begun to focus more on that. We passed a bill this year that would set up an alternative track to a standard diploma for those kids who want to go into career and technical education. We are putting money into vocational education, career and technical education, but in my judgment, we're not doing enough for that. We need to be doing more, and we're beginning to focus on that. I agree with you. I think it's an important area in our state that we have left. We've moved away from that and gone too far toward the ultra academic track, and we need to get back to that, and I'm all in favor of it, and we're working hard to do that.
Representative Brown has been a great leader in this in his capacity as chairman of the Education Committee in the House. Senator Videk Carmichael has done the same thing over on the Senate side. I'm a member of that Education Committee, and yes, Rodney is right on track. This has been kind of pushed on the back burner for the last several years, kind of got away from it for a while. I'm a product of vocational education and the cooperative education program where you work half day and go to school in the morning, take your core classes and get college ready and continue to work and create a career path at the same time. I'm a product of that, and I think we need to get back to that and make available not necessarily an alternative diploma, although I'm not opposed to that, but a true high school diploma with some job training so that you can go to work if that's what you choose to do, or go to college and have those core classes behind you. And Rodney's exactly right, and Cecil is exactly right. Pardon me, Representative Brown's exactly right. We don't need to cut funding there. We don't need to stop funding there. We need to increase funding there and create a better workforce for the state of Mississippi.
Part of that was a result of No Child Left Behind, and there's nobody to blame for that. It was a well-intended effort. It's going to be tweaked now. If the President and the Congress get their way, they'll tweak it and move it toward a career path. And I'm hopeful that they will move away so much from this testing that we have, high-stakes testing on just a few core subjects, and move and offer alternative to kids that want to do well, can do well, but not necessarily want to be college graduates.
On the subject of education, Representative Brown, Tuesday the Senate voted to put $30 million back into education, but didn't cut $30 million from other agencies. I guess the question is whether you think it's a tactic to push the matter along to conference talks.
Well, my discussion with the senators who did that, who offered the amendment and voted for it, was that they wanted to make a statement that they understood that was unbalancing their budget, if they would, but they felt like when they got to conference that the Senate, their part of the Senate, the majority of the Senate who voted for that, needed to make a statement that K-12 was a priority of theirs, and that was really all they were trying to do. They knew this was not going to go through with an unbalanced budget, and they were just trying to make a statement that we think that K-12 education needs to be a priority, and we're going to vote for that, and that if additional money comes along through additional federal funds, we want the majority of those federal funds be devoted to public education. That was what they were trying to say, knowing that, in fact, the bill, in fact, it had a reverse repealer or something in it that wouldn't let it become law, but they wanted to make a statement that those 31 people were standing up saying public education was their #1 priority. So that's what that was about.
Senator Burton, is that about right?
I think that's the general feeling of those who proposed the amendment and voted for it. I voted against the amendment. I just hate to send an unbalanced budget across the hall, knowing that it's unbalanced. I mean, sometimes we do that not knowing because things happen, like today we had the reduction in the revenue estimate and that kind of thing. But knowing that we were going to send an unbalanced budget, we've taken great pride on the Senate side over the years in doing this thing in this way. Number one, we determine the amount of revenue that's available to us, and number two, we appropriate that amount of revenue. we blew it out of the water by doing that yesterday, and it wasn't because we don't think education should get its historical percentage and then some if there's some available, but we certainly didn't feel that we should send an unbalanced budget across the hall, and that's what we've done.
Okay, and I want to remind our viewers and our listeners of the telephone number, toll-free, 1-877-405-5247. We have about 15 minutes left in the show. Representative Brown, clearly a lot of your debate over budget matters hinges on what the federal government will provide to the states in general. Congress is considering extending the Medicaid match, for instance, and there are additional funds being considered for all states facing the budget pinch. The question is, are lawmakers waiting for Washington to act before finalizing the state budget?
Not at this point, no. We keep getting news that this federal match money for Medicaid has been extended. I think there was some action in the United States Senate today that may have impacted that. If that's true, it'll be somewhere between $175 and $200 million of additional money for the state. I'm hopeful that that did in fact happen. It will certainly help us, but at this point we're not waiting on anybody. I think the decision was made today when we voted on the revenue estimate. That was an implicit decision that we were going to go ahead and push the process and try to reach a conclusion on a normal schedule.
Senator Burton, do you think Washington, too many lawmakers are waiting on Washington to find out what happens with stimulus money before they're ready to act?
Boy, I hope not, because I tell you what, if I've learned anything, nothing happens fast in Washington, and I have learned that over the last several years, and particularly right now. And any time you have a change of administration after 8 years particularly, and you got a new administration come in, you got new regulators, you've got new secretaries, you've got all these things that happen, and they're writing the regulations. They're still writing regulations for some of the bills that passed during the Bush administration. So I mean, it's just a big changeover that's going on. So nothing's happening fast at this point in Washington. So I hope nobody's waiting on that. I do think that eventually we will get word that the FMAP has been extended. That will help us some. And I do think that some of the funds can be used in certain ways and will be mandated to be used in certain ways. It really deals with a Medicaid match, not really new money. It's just that we get more in the match for a longer period of time, and that might free up some additional money down the road for some other spending projects. But there's also the health care bill out there that's pending, and we don't know what that might do to Medicaid. That might actually increase the Medicaid budget. So I mean, you know, we can't wait on Washington. We've got to do and operate with what we have in front of us right now.
And that FMAP that you're talking about, that's a 1-to-6 match
yes.
from the federal government?
For every 15 cents we put in the Medicaid program, the federal government puts in 85.
Okay. We have a phone call from Fulton. This is Cindy who has a question for our legislators. Cindy, go right ahead.
Yeah, for either one.
Go right ahead, Cindy. Your television might be up too loud. You might want to turn that down before.
For either one, Representative Brown or the senator, I would like to know, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you, as the legislature, offered to take a 10% cut in your pay. I would like to know if the governor has taken or offered to even take a cut in his salary or anything that he is appropriated. And I would like to know, with our economy and the situation that it's in and what our state has been promised as far as Toyota, I would like to know if that is ever going to come to pass, or are we going to lose those millions and millions of dollars?
I missed the last part.
The first
part,
the
governor's office has taken the cut that other state agencies has taken. So yeah, in that respect, I don't know that he's talked about cutting his salary, but his office budget has been reduced commensurate with what other state agency have taken.
In fact, he's had to lay off some people.
Sure, he's laid off some people.
And the second part of the question, I guess, dealt with Blue Springs and Toyota and whether the fear of whether we were going to lose all that money after putting all that money in.
I don't think we will. It's unfortunate that we've had this delay. I mean, Blue Springs was announced right before the worst economic times since the Great Depression. I think it's unlikely that Toyota will walk away. I think there are clawback provisions if they did, so we'll get our money back.
We would get our money back.
We won't lose our money. It's unfortunate, again, that it's happened. I wish it had accelerated, and we had a lot of people working up there, and someday, hopefully, that will happen. But the way I understand it under the law, we will not lose our money.
Okay, well, unemployment benefits, let's get to that before we leave tonight. That's been the subject of strong differences in the legislature. On the one hand, $56 million in federal stimulus funding. On the other is changing state law to allow part-time workers to draw unemployment. The governor says taking the federal money is a bad road to go down. What are your thoughts?
I think that it is unconscionable we have not taken the money. It's $56 million that will aid 40,000 unemployed Mississippians, people who are working. Everybody needs to understand that you don't get unemployment benefits unless you lost your job through no fault of your own. You are a working person and you're willing to go back to work. Now, the governor argues that sometime down the road, 4 years from now, unemployment taxes may go up on employers. First place, nobody knows what's going to happen 4 years from now. There's nowhere in the world anybody can project. Nobody projected this recession that we've been in.
Well, I think he's saying the federal money will go away.
The federal money will go away, but that doesn't mean unemployment taxes will go up. It depends on what's in the fund at that time and how fast recovery comes back. He's saying the money will clearly go away. There's no doubt about that. But the question of whether taxes go up or not is an entirely different issue. If the fund is solvent, there's no reason for taxes to go up. And he couldn't possibly know that. There's $56 million sitting out there that will impact cities and counties across the state of Mississippi, impact the state budget, and will put to work or give additional benefits 40,000 people in Mississippi who are out of work right now. I cannot imagine any reason in the world why we would not do that.
Senator Burton, the federal money does go right back into the economy. What's wrong with that?
Agreed. It does go back into the economy, but we're not talking about unemployment benefits for people with full-time jobs. We're talking about unemployment benefits that have never been paid to part-time workers in Mississippi and making that available as of right now for who knows how long, and then what will happen at the end. Again, here's another unknown, and I talked about this earlier tonight. I'm just about tired of voting for things and passing laws, not knowing what's out there. The unemployment rate may not go up. The unemployment tax may not go up, but it might. So why take that chance? Why run the risk of taxing our employers down the road for $56 million, which in the great scheme of things is not a lot of money compared to what we have accepted from the stimulus package. We've put a lot of people to work and saved many, many jobs out there with the federal stimulus money that has been made available to us for construction projects, for education, for all kinds of things. Medicaid match, all kinds of things. This $56 million is out there. But even if you disagree with the governor, why would you let the Employment Security Commission die on June 30th of this year and not have unemployment benefits paid to anybody effective July 1.
You're not happy with that tactic?
I'm not happy with that.
We didn't have to do that. We had a bill in the House that had a majority vote in the House that would have reinstated the Employment Security Commission, would have taken the $56 million, and the governor worked hard to kill that bill. So that's why it's going to die if it does. Let me go back to the part-time workers. Let's talk about who these part-time workers are. You're talking about a single mother who wants to work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 hours a day, that's part-time, working hard, who loses her job and is not willing to take a full-time job. Under current law, we cover part-time workers. We pay unemployment benefits to part-time workers, but only if they're willing to check off on a box that says, I want to take a full-time job. So if you've got a single mother who's working from 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when she picks her kids up from school, and she can't afford child care, she wants to take care of her kids, which as I understand is a very conservative position. You want to take care of your kids in the afternoon. If she loses her job now, she gets no benefits unless she's willing to take a job and get child care, for a full-time job and get child care. Under the provision we would be willing to adopt, she would get unemployment benefits unless but she would still have to take another part-time job. So what's wrong with that? You got somebody working 6 hours versus working 8 hours a day. And by the way, the total benefit, the maximum benefit that you can get in the state of Mississippi is $235 a week, $235, and most people don't get that. In order to get $235 a week, you have to have been earning $25,000 a year. So if let's take a teacher assistant in Mississippi, and by the way, we're laying them off by the droves. They make $13,000 a year. If we lay off a teacher assistant who works part of the day from 8 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's part-time, they lose their jobs, they may collect $100 a week. And yet we're not going to cover them because they have to be willing to take a full-time job. I mean, it just absolutely makes no sense. We're hurting people. Everybody talks about the employers. I never hear the governor's office or the people that are supporting the governor's office talk about the 40,000 people, 40,000 unemployed people out there that would be helped by this. And I'm a little bit tired of hearing about the employers and the poor employers out there. They're going to have to pay this tax. First place, nobody knows they're going to have to pay it, and we're leaving $56 million on the table that's going to go to other states. It's not like we're going to save $56 million. That money is going to be given to other states. It could go to poor Mississippians who are out there without health insurance and without jobs.
Well, the employers can't be left out of this thing, Mr. Brown, because these people wouldn't have any jobs part-time or otherwise if people didn't hire them. The employers are providing these jobs. Why would we want to run the risk of a short-term benefit for a few at the risk of a long-term problem with employers going out of business because they can't afford the new taxes, or having to fire people because they can't afford new taxes, and lay people off because they can't afford the new taxes? That's the risk you run down the road. The employers have to be a part of the conversation.
I'll remind you, Senator Burton, we just cut taxes for employers so we could divert $20 million a year out of the unemployment fund to give to community colleges for workforce training.
Absolutely.
To benefit employers.
Absolutely.
We gave them $20 million. So if there's been any drain on the fund that will cause cause an increase in the taxes, it's because we've diverted this money for the benefit of employers. That's what's been going on since the governor's been in office.
I wish we had started with that question instead of ending with that question. But our final question for the night, because we only have about a minute, setting budgetary matters aside, what are your particular priorities for this session?
We've got some education issues that I think are very important, that we're working hard. We've got a, quote, charter school, innovative school bill that we're working hard on. The budget issue is a hard one, but the education issue, long term, the budget issue will get solved. And we'll, it'll be tough for a couple of years, but the state's going to survive that. But the long-term economic and social benefit of this state's going to be described about whatever kind of education system we have, and I'm concerned about that.
Very quickly, Terry.
I agree. We can't let the long-term benefit for the social programs and other ideas that we've moved forward over the last several years suffer as a result of any budget crunch that we might be in. We'll do the best we can to make sure we don't let that don't slide backwards in that regard.
All right. Thank you very much to both of our guests, but that's all the time we have for tonight. We want to thank you for joining the discussion. Quorum returns on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We hope you join us.